Hello, everybody. My name is Alex D'Amato, and today I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the barriers that are faced by ex-prison inmates and how we can address these barriers as a society. According to the Urban Institute, 1 in 3 Americans have a criminal record, and 640,000 people are released from prison each year, with an additional 9 million in and out of jail each year. So this goes to show there's so many people in our population that have a criminal record. And this topic is extremely personal to me, especially because I have some family members with criminal records who often struggle to find jobs, and they mainly need to settle for manual labor jobs that are low paying and just extremely physical jobs. Even if my family members are like in their 50s or 60s, they're still doing these jobs because there's nothing better available. No opportunities for somebody with criminal records. And so with that being said, I'm going to be talking about some of the barriers that are faced by these individuals. And one of the main barriers is an overall lack of employment. And so according to the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, 90% of companies use background checks in the hiring process. And so as a result, only 15% of people with criminal records receive callbacks for the job. And this number is 28% for those with no criminal records. So it might not seem like a massive difference, but 28% in comparison to 15 is still a big difference. And so as a whole, the unemployment rate for formerly incarcerated people is 27.3%, more than 7 times the US average of 3.6%. And this is also higher than the total unemployment rate during the Great Depression, which was 25%. And this is also a big deal based on race. So those who are released from prison, among those released from prison, Black women are most likely to not have a job. And this is due to biased hiring practices and just an overall lack of trust. I mean, as you can see for the general population, the unemployment rate is a lot closer, but then for incarcerated people, Black women is almost double the amount of white women. And also from this, when these people actually do get jobs, Black women are normally only receiving part-time jobs, and they have the lowest percentage of full-time jobs of any other demographic in the US. And this chart as well just shows that Black women have the most amount of unemployed people after being released from prison, the least amount of full-time work, and the most part-time jobs. And so another issue with this, or another barrier faced by ex-inmates, is just an overall lack of education. And so in 1996, the one-strike policy allowed public housing agencies to essentially evict anybody suspected of criminal activity, even if they weren't responsible for it, or if a family member did something, the whole family was evicted. And another big factor is that 4 out of 5 landlords use background checks to filter out tenants with criminal records. And so this leaves 1 of 5 ex-inmates on the streets, homeless. And when people are homeless and have no jobs, they're also less likely to get an education. So 40% of inmates have no high school education. The programs in prison don't help them get educated. And so after they're released, only 44% are able to access higher education. And also the infamous 1994 crime bill blocked Pell Grants for former inmates, so further restricting their ability to become more educated and get those higher paying jobs. And so when people are homeless, they have no education, no job, they mainly just fall back on the same habits that got them in prison to begin with. So according to the Bureau of justice statistics, 66% of prisoners released across 24 states in 2008 were arrested again within 3 years of being released. And after a 10-year period in 2018, 82% of them were arrested again. So this just goes to show they had nowhere to go after being released. They weren't prepared for the real world, and they weren't set up for success. They were set up for failure. And so, according to minimize some of these barriers, prisons just need to have more programs that make it easier for inmates to prepare for the outside world. According to the Prison Journal, the Norwegian prison system can be used as a model for U.S. prisons because it focuses on creating positive relationships between inmates and non-uniform staff, so anybody who's not a security officer. So it could be cooks, mental health officials, whoever, therapists, teachers, creating close bonds and remaining close to the community as well. So that way they're not completely isolated. And this has been successful in Norway. It's created the lowest incarceration rate in the world, frankly. And so another method to reduce discrimination, oh, sorry. So this is what one of the cells in Norway looks like. And this is the Halden prison, which is the most humane prison in the world. As you can see, the prison cell almost looks nicer than a URI dorm room. So they're offered a lot of resources that put them on good footing after they're released from prison. And so another method we can use to reduce discrimination in hiring practices is to incorporate what we call ban the box policies, which essentially deprioritize criminal histories from applications and delays background checks until later in the process. That way, employers aren't biased based on those criminal histories. And so they're focusing almost completely on the applicant's skills, their abilities, their merit. So you could compare this to banning affirmative action. You're completely focusing on someone's qualifications for the job rather than irrelevant factors. And so finally, another way we can prevent some of these barriers is to open businesses, open restaurants that are specifically designed to hire ex-prisoners and just give them the opportunity to work in a welcoming environment and just get back on their feet after being released. So it's one thing to just suggest these policies and strategies, but it's another thing to actually incorporate them. So imagine you're in prison for 2 decades, have little resources, and such poor health care to the point where you live in pain every single day. This is a reality for so many people in prison, but many prisons are trying to reverse this through programs, including the Norwegian model, or inspired by the Norwegian model. One of the main prisons doing this is the Plaquemines Correctional Facility in Louisiana. So what they have is vocational training units where inmates live together and learn a new trade together. And as a result, 80% leave prison with a new job based on the skills they learned in prison. And Florida prisons have done something similar, except they use reverse job fairs, which allow inmates to sort of showcase their skills in front of employers. And this has resulted in a 55% higher rate. And as far as businesses go, Edwin's Culinary School and Restaurant is exclusively designed for ex-prisoners, and it's a 6-month fine dining culinary training program in Cleveland that hires former inmates and helps them re-enter society by learning discipline and valuable skills in the restaurant. And after graduating from these programs, people are much more likely to be hired by various restaurants and businesses across the country. So every 2 months, they hire 40 inmates, 80% of whom are African American. and less than 1% of graduates end up back in prison. Only 2 out of 350 graduates have gone back to prison. So these are astonishing numbers that Edwards has done for former inmates. And so now that you know some of the real world benefits of these strategies, here's what you can do to make a difference in your own life. Because I know most of these things are inaccessible to college students. So I would highly recommend following the organization Reentry 2030, which basically improves reentry success, reduces unemployment rates, and encourages all 50 states to commit to a better future for ex-inmates. If you sign up for email updates on their website, they'll send you updates about suggestions for stable housing, healthcare, education, employment, anything that ex-inmates would need to succeed. So that way the incarceration rates can dip dramatically. So as you can see here, this is the website, and they're currently trying to get all 50 states to sign on this to commit to advancing racial equity and clearing some of these unnecessary barriers in the hiring practice process and things like that. So in conclusion, as former President George W. Bush once said, America is the land of second chances, and when the gates of prison open, the path ahead should lead to a better life. Thank you.